Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, January 10th, 2025. The cost of federal regulations, especially the income tax. The talking heads on the legacy media shows are becoming more and more frantic as Inauguration Day approaches. They're alarmed because it appears that President Trump is renewing his commitment to eliminate many federal regulations and terminate the employment of many federal regulators. These talking heads are convinced that without the regulators and their regulations, the ordinary people who run companies and live in America will not be able to survive. After all, these regulators, who likely have not had employment in the private sector since they mowed lawns or babysat, well, they are just so much smarter than everybody else. Many think that the Trump team's animosity towards regulations and regulators is simply an attack on the deep state. Well, that's partially true, but remember that Mr. Trump is a businessman. He understands the many economic reasons for eliminating unnecessary regulations. 10,000 Commandments, a study prepared by the Competitive Enterprise Institute, reviews data on the cost of regulations to the economy. Here are some of their findings. Federal regulations now cost an estimated $2.1 trillion per year. But an October 2023 National Association of Manufacturers report models regulatory compliance at $3.079 trillion annually. U.S. households pay, on average, $15,788 annually in a hidden regulatory tax, which consumes 17% of income and 22% of household expenses. These outlays exceed the expenditures for health care, food, transportation, entertainment, apparel, services, and savings. Only the costs of housing, which stand at $24,298 annually, exceed the cost of regulation compliance. The higher NAM figure implies that regulatory compliance consumes $22,962 per household, or 31% of the household expense budget. The regulatory tax cost of $2.117 trillion compares to the individual income tax costs estimated at $2.328 trillion for 2023, and it stands at nearly 4 times the corporate income tax of $546 billion. The NAM cost figure of $3.1 trillion annually would exceed the sum of both. If it were a country, U.S. regulation costs would be the world's 10th largest economy, ranking behind Canada and ahead of Italy. If we exclude the U.S. economy from that list, the U.S. regulation economy would then be the 9th largest, again still behind Canada and ahead of Italy. The 10.34 billion hours Washington says it took to complete federal paperwork in 2022, according to the information collection budget, translates to the equivalent of 14,883 human lifetimes. The tally of final rules for 2023 stood at 3,018, which is the second lowest count since at least 1976. On the other hand, the Federal Register, which contains these rules, surged to 89,368 pages, the second highest tally on record, and a 12% rise over 2022. In conclusion, President Trump and Elon Musk believe that some regulations are needed. However, many regulations are the result of unelected bureaucrats who are far exceeding their mandate from Congress and are not needed. They believe unneeded regulations are crippling the American economy and the small businesses that contribute approximately 43.5% to the U.S. gross domestic product. Repealing unneeded regulations and eliminating unneeded regulators will lead to a rapid increase in economic growth, which will benefit all Americans. And if 1/2 of the cost of regulations were eliminated, the average U.S. household would have an additional $7,894 to spend each year. Please reach out to your members of Congress and remind them that income tax complexity now costs the U.S. economy over $546 billion annually. This works out to over $4,000 per family in additional annual costs that they have to pay. Millions of American jobs are lost by the income tax incentives given to imports. The fair tax will replace the income tax and immediately eliminate the IRS and put tens of thousands of tax lobbyists out of work. And no other reform will immediately be felt by all Americans and will do more to increase the growth of the American economy. This is our opportunity to make a real change that will lead to greater prosperity for our children and the nation. And it's an opportunity that may not come again in our lifetime. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. It will take the diligent efforts from all of us. We need your financial assistance and we need your grassroots assistance. Please email us at info@fairtax.org and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representatives and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask them why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution: pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.